It is wonderful to welcome so many visitors to Orchard Hill Parish Church, and it is wonderful that people from faith communities all across the south side and some from slightly further afield are with us this afternoon to take part in this event. In a moment, I will hand over to Susan Siegel to explain the role of the Council of Christian and Jews in arranging this event to bring together people from different faith communities to celebrate together and to think about the future of Glasgow. There's so much division in the world. It's lovely to have an event where people are all focused on the future in a positive way. So thank you all so much for coming. In a moment, as I say, I'll hand over to Susan Siegel, the chair of the West of Scotland branch of the Council of Christian and Jews, and then indeed the highlight of our afternoon to our speaker, Philip Rodney, who we're very much looking forward to hearing from. But Glasgow, as I'm often reminded by friends, is only a city because it grew out of a faith community 850 years ago, and faith communities of all different persuasions have made a huge contribution to this history of this great city, which we call ours even in Giffnock. So I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the afternoon, and thank you again for such a wonderful turnout. But at this point, can I ask Susan Siegel, the chair of our West of Scotland branch of the Council of Christian and Jews, to say a few words about what we do at CCJ, and then, equally importantly, to introduce this afternoon's speaker. Susan.
Thank you all. Hopefully you can hear me. This is just a wonderful occasion to say hello to many people. I try not to say old friends because I'm really old, so many friends of long standing. So it's really wonderful to see all of you here, and it's definitely a multi-faith activity, which of course is what we're all about. As Anne mentioned, I'm the chair of the West of Scotland Council of Christians and Jews. We get together at least 5 or 6 times a year. We hold events together. We've done a few walkabouts, visiting various faith communities, and we're working on a number of activities, including the Jane Haining Project. Many of you have heard about that project. So those of you who are interested in joining, we'd love to have you, and we'll make sure that we have your email address, and we'll invite you to further events. So we're very, very pleased today to be in this wonderful building. I had been here many years ago, and it's great to be back. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Philip Rodney, who is, I'm sure, a friend to many of you, known to many of you. He was the chair of Bernice Paul, which was a very well-known law firm in the city. And when he retired, he has done quite a few things in the community. Among them, and I'm not sure I'm going to say the committee right, but he is on the committee to regenerate downtown Glasgow, which, as you can well imagine, is quite a task, and he's going to be talking to us about that today. And I always get this mixed up. I don't remember whether he said he likes fast cars and loud music, or, well, anyway, he'll tell us more about what he believes in and what he's been working on, and I'm sure you'll join me in welcoming Philip. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for that introduction, and it's wonderful to be here today, especially to have AV support, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm not even going to have to press for the next slide. Ian has very kindly offered to do that. So thank you for the privilege of speaking here today, and a fair warning, this may be the only love letter you'll hear that includes quite so much swearing under its breath, well, mostly under its breath. I've been asked to share my perspective on the city I care about and look forward to the next 850 years. A confession, I've got absolutely no idea what the city is going to be like in 2875, none. I can barely predict next Tuesday, but I had a go. So if I could have the first slide, please. So this is speculative fiction. So we're in 2875, the Greater Glasgow conurbation, now stretching from what used to be called Edinburgh to past Dumbarton. It floats above a radioactive bog where a Clyde once flowed, held aloft by duct tape, anti-gravity pylons that have been, quote, scheduled for replacement since 2647. Council meetings are televised blood sports streamed across 17 planets. Budget disputes are settled by bare-knuckle cage fights. The pay-per-view revenue finally solved the funding crisis. Iron Brew remains the national drink and is now fuel, hair tonic, and mildly radioactive currency. The Bank of Scotland issues it in denominations of regular, diet, and the increasingly rare 1901 original recipe. Next slide, please. The Duke of Wellington statue still stands, naturally, now equipped with an AI traffic cone that delivers sarcastic remarks to tourists in 42 languages. It's sentient and runs a successful podcast. The Glaswegian dialect has evolved to the point where UNESCO classifies it as a sentient cryptographic system. English-speaking visitors require neural translation implants just to order a roll and sausage. So that's my vision. Oh, and finally, sorry, the weather remains identical. 4 seasons in 1 day, every day. Climate scientists gave up in 2347 and now simply call it the Glasgow anomaly. And the subway, still only 2 lines. Plans for a third have been, quotes, under consideration for 783 years. Okay, next slide, please. So, why I've earned the right to complain. I'm no town planner nor sociologist, so why have I earned the right to complain? I was born in what is now the Orchard Park Hotel in Giffnock, as was Gordon Brown, whose father was a minister at St Mary's in Govan. I learned this not from the Giffnock archives, but really from the Domino's Pizza website. Next slide, please. I was educated at Giffnock Synagogue Kindergarten, and that's me top second from the right. Really cute. Well, at least my mother thinks so. I then went to Giffnock Primary, the High School of Glasgow, and Strathclyde University. My legal career was principally in Glasgow, apart from 1 brief rental in Kilbarchan, which doesn't count, and I've lived in Greater Glasgow my whole life. I've sat on the boards of both Glasgow School of Art and the Royal Conservatoire, and as Susan was saying, I'm currently on a commission looking at the future of Glasgow, which is either an act of hope or masochism. I haven't quite made up my mind. I've had opportunities to live elsewhere, but never done so, and that should tell you what this place means to me. It's a city I love, but one I have over the past decade become increasingly frustrated with. Frustration is what happens when you care deeply about something and watch it not live up to its potential. Next slide, please. Looking back at my own words, over the last 4 years, I've written lots of columns for the Times on Glasgow. The titles tell the story. Here's a small selection. Glasgow's miles better, those days are long ago. It's time to admit that Glasgow is a dump, but we can reboot it. Glasgow needs strong leadership to reverse the city's slide into decay. Next slide, please. These are some of the articles. If my tone has become more shrill, that's because watching something you love struggle is harder than watching something you're indifferent to. And I'm not alone. The articles have provoked literally thousands of comments online, almost all agreeing. And some of the comments that I've received, Glasgow has become a place without ambition. Last time I visited Sucky Hall Street made me want to cry. The city centre is uninspiring and depressing. As a born and bred Glaswegian, I agree with every word. Glasgow City Council must wake up. There are 2 consistent themes. The first is a criticism of the Scottish Government for focusing on constitutional issues to the exclusion of everything else. And the second is a criticism of the Council for incompetence and arrogance. I love Glasgow, its vibrant, quirky, beautiful, gala self. I used to relish taking overseas visitors on walking tours. I genuinely cannot recall an instance when they didn't come back enthralled. But no more, and that breaks my heart. The city centre is a shadow of itself. The buzz, the civic pride, the ambition, gone. Hard to believe that in the 19th century, Glasgow was the second city of the empire, with immigrants from the Highlands, Ireland, Italy, Eastern Europe, and Jewish refugees. Glasgow's diversity and culture were full of life. Fast forward to the 80s and 90s, the Borough Collection in 1983, the Garden Festival in 1988, magical. European City of Culture 1990. We all believed that Glasgow was miles better. But somewhere between then and now, we lost not just the momentum, but the belief that we deserve momentum. Next slide, please. And the one after that. Okay. Before diving into what I think is wrong with Glasgow, let me set out why cities matter. Cities will become increasingly important to human civilization. Half of humanity currently lives in cities, about 4 billion people, and that will rise to about 60% by 2030 and 2/3 by 2050. And to put that into context, at the turn of the 20th century, it was only 15%. We're living through the largest mass migration in human history, but that's not country to country, but countryside to city. And why? Cities are efficient. They create shared wealth, reduced costs, easier transport. They're hubs of creativity, places where people share ideas, cities where things happen. However, cities have to develop to reflect changing requirements and ensure environmental sustainability. Cities of the future need to be low carbon, resource efficient, and socially just. They'll have to adapt to post-COVID flexible working and the inexorable move towards a 4-day working week. Glasgow has the opportunity to be at the forefront of this evolution, but only if we're honest about where we are right now. Next slide, please. The intervention, looking problems in the eye. Like a family confronting destructive behaviour in a loved one, we need to look Glasgow's problems straight in the eye. Next slide, please. No flinching, no excuse, no blaming Margaret Thatcher for things happening 35 years later in 2025. Glasgow has been Scotland's largest city for a couple of centuries, centre of a region that is home to 35% of Scotland's population. But that's not a God-given right. Glasgow's population peaked in the 1920s and 30s. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Scale does not guarantee survival. Ancient Rome went from having a population over 1 million people to fewer than 50,000 during the early medieval period. Cities don't shrink to greatness. In 2018, the projections showed Edinburgh would outstrip Glasgow by 2031 to become Scotland's biggest city. National Records of Scotland now predicts Glasgow will still be larger 20 years from now. But the trend suggests Edinburgh has been much better at growing through attracting business and migration, and that should concern us. Next slide, please. The Sucky Hall Street disaster. For generations, Sucky Hall Street defined the city, where you went, where things happened. Next slide, please. Now, local traders and mainstream brands have abandoned it. It's difficult to think of a household name with a store there, bar Waterstones, and even they must question their life choices sometimes. Last time I counted, there were over 40 shops that were empty. Those occupied increasingly comprised temporary lets selling tacky souvenirs and discounted American candy. This isn't short term. BHS closed in 2016, 9 years ago. Gap sites are there where fires consumed Victoria's nightclub and the ABC. The plans for Watt Brothers store closed in 2019 appear sterilised. And if you elevate your gaze, the upper levels are almost universally emptied or abandoned. Entire floors of building gone. Some retailers say Sauchiehall Street is beyond saving. After investing $70 million filming in Glasgow, Warner Brothers shelved the filming of Batgirl. Perhaps it looked too desolate to represent Gotham City. Let that sink in. We made Gotham City look too cheerful. And there's the same fate snaking around to Buchanan Street, Renfield Street, Hope Street, Argyle Street, all desolate with vacancy rates climbing. And whereas Newcastle, Leeds, Manchester exploited their waterfronts with retail and leisure, both banks of the Clyde remain largely sterile. We have a river, a genuine asset, and we've done almost nothing with it. Glasgow used to promote itself as a place to shop, but with Multrees Walk and the St James Quarter in Edinburgh stealing a lead, they're eating our lunch. Next slide, please. Transport, a masterclass in lack of ambition. The interminable debate over unified transport connecting airport, railway, bus and subway shows how little importance we give business and tourism. A proposed tram link from airport to Paisley to then connect with a train doesn't cut it when every other city you can think of has a direct link. This shows naivety, arrogance, or a lack of ambition, possibly all three. Discussion about the link between the Glasgow airport and the city centre started in the early 2000s. The business case for the Clyde Metro won't be completed until 2027, and even with approval, building the infrastructure will take decades. Next slide. Sorry, 2 slides on, by which time we'll be commuting by jetpack. Next slide, please. There are many problems to be addressed, and I just want to comment on a few of them. It's not just that the city looks unattractive. With physical deterioration comes a perception it's no longer safe. Whether that matches reality is almost beside the point. Perception becomes reality in how people decide where to live, work, visit, and invest. From an investment standpoint, Scotland tends to be at a disadvantage. Property market improvements start in London, move through the English regional cities, then finally arrive in Scotland. We're already at the back of the queue. We can't afford to make ourselves less attractive. Feedback that I hear from investors is that Glasgow is more difficult to develop in than most other regional cities. Glasgow City Council doesn't roll out the red carpet. Some foreign investors have tried to engage unsuccessfully with the council and have gone away. Glasgow's off their list now, and that's actual money going elsewhere. The council has no money. Financial constraints, the equal pay settlement burden, and emerging zero carbon costs constrain their ability to invest despite critical need. The council and Scottish Government don't understand commercial viability. This results in ill-founded policy decisions. They think someone will magically make things happen because they draw something on a map. That's not how development works. The leadership response problem, or lack thereof. Rather than confront reality, the council leader addresses rats and waste by saying, Edinburgh and London are worse. Quotes, we're better than another city with a rat problem. It's not a compelling tourism slogan. And when Margaret Thatcher, who left office 35 years ago, is still referenced as the architect of our current misfortunes, it demonstrates that city leaders prefer excuses to solutions. When the Centre for Cities reported Glasgow's economy is underperforming by £7 billion per annum, given its scale, the council leader simply said she disagreed. That's one approach to data you don't like: denial. The health crisis, and this is the part that should horrify us. In Glasgow today, healthy life expectancy for a man is just 54.6 years. That's not a retirement age, that's midlife. Even after adjusting for poverty, Glaswegians are 30% more likely to die early than people in Liverpool or Manchester. Why? Cancer, heart attacks, strokes, but also deaths of despair, suicide, drugs, alcohol. 1 in 4 men won't live to see 65. And that's not a spreadsheet number. That's your neighbour, your mate, your brother. If that doesn't make us angry enough to demand change, what will? Next slide, please. But Glasgow still has what it takes. Next slide. We're still a cultural powerhouse. We've got Scottish Opera, Scottish Ballet, the National Theatre of Scotland, the Hydro, Barrowlands, King Tut's Wawa Hut. We're the first UK city named UNESCO City of Music. But what's the point if visitors arrive at Central Station to rough sleepers, rubbish, and no taxis? No marketing can fix that. Next slide, please. We've got world-class education here, but we're losing the talent. Our universities are global players. Strathclyde recently ranked at 11 in the Times UK Guide. Even more impressively, perhaps, the Royal Conservatoire ranks 6 globally, ahead of Juilliard. And the Glasgow School of Art ranks 12th globally. Not bad for a city of 650,000 people. We're attracting brilliant students, but we're not keeping them. We're training them, then waving them off because we haven't given them a reason to stay. Next slide, please. But there are bright spots in the economy. Despite the gloom, there are bright spots. In Tradeston, Barclays opened up their campus there, and they created 5,000 jobs with an average salary of £75,000. So these are real jobs. It's not just back office. And that's very positive. Glasgow was named Europe's top large city for overseas investment by the Financial Times last year. We've built a tech economy. We're one of Europe's top 16 financial centres. And here's a stat that may stop you. Next slide, please. We're the world's second largest producers of small satellites after California. Yes, satellites built here. So we've got strengths in health tech, climate tech, precision medicine, creative industries, and they're growing. The tragedy is Glasgow has so much, but we're wasting it. Glasgow's bones are strong. We just haven't looked after them. The crisis is real, but so is the opportunity. If we face the hard truths and act, the city can lead again, because Glasgow isn't broken, it's just waiting to be revived. Next slide, please. What actually works? This is about learning from other cities. Glasgow has thought in terms of initiatives, not strategies. Short-term costs, not long-term benefits. Policies dictated from on high, not developed in partnership. Ideology trumping pragmatism. Let me tell you about places that have got it right in different ways and from whom we can learn. Next slide, please. Manchester is, for me, the British success story. It's vibrant, it's confident, it's buzzing with international identity. It plays to its authentic strengths rather than being generic. It wasn't always this way. Manchester declined from the early 20th century. The port shut, heavy industry declined, 150,000 jobs lost. Does that sound familiar? But Manchester created an overarching strategy straddling culture and commerce. It embraced the Manchester music scene, responded to the IRA Arndale bombing, hosted the Commonwealth Games, leveraged its football importance. Each was a stepping stone, not an isolated event. Manchester invested in infrastructure, a waterfront promenade, roads, bridges. It created the Metrolink, the first light railway network built in a British city for over a century. It isn't embarrassed by attracting wealthy residents who pay taxes and start businesses. The City Council appointed Sir Howard Bernstein as chief executive from 1998 to 2017, nearly 20 years of consistent leadership. The council put political dogma aside and engaged constructively with Westminster, irrespective of whether the administration was Conservative or Labour. They put the city first. Manchester's current aim is to be the UK's leading digital city and top 5 in Europe. They're not satisfied, they're always pushing. Media City UK, BBC UK's national, produces BBC UK national output transferred from London. CBeebies, BBC Sport, Six Music, Match of the Day. And if you watch, BBC Breakfast studio backdrop projects a confident Manchester nationally. Compare that with Glasgow, Pacific Quay, we've got BBC Scotland and STV, that's it. Images of the squinty bridge are for local consumption only. We settled for less, again. Next slide, please. I recently visited Melbourne, one of the most vibrant cities I've ever seen. And there are lots of things there I saw that we could adapt. They have festivals the year round, not just for visitors, but for residents. And that gives the city a real buzz. Culture and green space as identity. Someone said to me in that direct Aussie way that Melbourne is about galleries and gardens, whereas Sydney, I shouldn't say what they said about Sydney within these sacred walls, but perhaps you can guess. They know what they are and they lean into it. There's a foodie culture, not Michelin-starred, but mid-market cafes and restaurants. They support independent traders, not chains. Coffee bars competing with each other. And it's been so successful, Starbucks have retreated because they couldn't compete. They take music seriously. Buskers are auditioned before performing, and they're allocated locations and time slots. Street performance is part of the cultural ecology, not merely tolerated. They've repurposed beautiful spaces. Traditional shopping arcades have been made into great places to eat and drink. Imagine if they did that with the Argyle Arcade or the Savoy Centre. Celebrating street art. There are 12 streets where artists are encouraged with spray cans. And it's become a genuine tourist attraction with walking tours. We could do that. We have cultural heroes everywhere. And there's an AC/DC alley, which is ironic when both Alcom and Malcolm Young actually came from Glasgow. So where's our Billy Connolly Road or our Simple Minds Street? They have free city centre transport, which removes barriers and encourages movement. There's been clever repurposing. They don't fetishise old buildings. In the city centre, rather than lie empty, St. Paul's Church is used as a showroom for a grungy clothes designer. Next slide, please. And that's Austin, Texas, and their official motto is keep it weird. They celebrate their quirkiness. Glasgow could do that likewise. We're weird, not anodyne, wonderfully, brilliantly weird. And let's own that. Next slide, please. So, Glasgow's own success story, we can do it again. Glasgow has been here before. We know how to do this because we've done it before. Next slide, please. Michael Kelly, then Lord Provost, kick-started the Glasgow Miles Better campaign and a remarkable civil renaissance, which I'm sure some of you remember. His actions predated Manchester's. The city was literally cleaned up. He put its interests before politics. Recognising Glasgow's success derived from commerce, Kelly partnered with business. He recognised culture's importance. And under his leadership, Glasgow looked to the future with a buzz that attracted external interest and bolstered our pride. We believed in ourselves, and that belief was infectious. Next slide. We did it once, and we can do it again, but we have to want to. Next slide, please. I want to talk briefly about the Golden Z, which was launched 18 months ago. It was a 400-page vision for transforming the city centre, reimagining our shopping streets as a Z-shaped zone of culture, health and leisure. To be fair, it looks stunning. The architects really put in a shift. The visuals are glossy, the intentions are good, and the ambitions are real. But here's the thing. It's not a plan, it's a promise, a hopeful sketch. Next slide. No firm timelines, no budgets, no sense of who's driving it forward. The Golden Z is inspiring, But right now, it's mostly gold leaf and good intentions. Next slide, please. This is the fun bit. What could we do? All right, enough doom. Let's talk about what we could do, where we stop wringing our hands and start rolling up our sleeves. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I've got my slides out of... no. Okay, let's go back. Let the fun bit, what could we do? No, okay, I'll stop there. Something's happened to my slides. The first one is get the basics right. Clean the city. It's not sexy, but a clean city is a safe city. People want to live in, invest in. If Tokyo or Disneyland can do it, we can too. My second thought is, let's hire a world-class chief executive, CEO-level leadership. Pay them whatever we need to get them. Let them do the job. No one micromanage. If this city were a startup, we'd pitch for top-tier talent. So let's act like it. Third, let's elect a proper mayor, a big beast who bleeds Glasgow, who can knock heads together and charm investors, who can stand on a world stage and say, come on, Glasgow, we've got ideas, ambition, our own, say, Andy Burnham. The fourth one is, let's make health the ultimate priority, not a bolt-on, not a campaign, a full 20-year strategy, bigger than party politics. Every policy decision measured against, will this help Glaswegians live longer, healthier lives? That's the filter. No slogans, just action, accountability, actual change. 5, be architecturally bold. Here's where I get into trouble. I love Macintosh, but instead of rebuilding the art school as a sad replica, let's build something new, something mad. Something that says, this is Glasgow in the 21st century. How about a Centre Pompidou-style arts complex, the Billy Connolly Centre, a joyful celebration of our culture, art, literature, music, public space, a building that looks like fun lives here. Number 6, Sucky Hall Street. We've tried everything short of a séance. Einstein said insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So let's stop forcing it back into a shopping street. Make it a creative district, cafe culture, studios, low rent or no rent spaces for startups, musicians, artists. Berlin did it, so can we. 7, green spaces. More than 35% of Glasgow is green space, equivalent to 160,000 football pitches. It's the third best in Scotland, in Britain. But most Glaswegians don't know it, so let's champion it, celebrate it, use it properly. And my last point is support local business. Look at Finniston, Shawlands, Denniston. They turned themselves around not through grand master plans, but because small businesses made things happen, despite the council's best efforts to bury them in red tape. So my radical idea is make entrepreneurship easier, not harder. Say to small businesses, we trust you, we'll back you, let's build together. Now, I'm getting really worried about my slides being out of space, so I'll say, next slide, please. No. Can we go after that? No. Okay, we'll go. Can you go back to then, and I'll improvise. Okay, and again. Okay. So, what I actually believe, under all of this, what I believe, cities are like people. They have good decades and bad decades. They get depressed, they put on weight, they stop going to the gym, they let the flat get messy, but they can also recover. They can remember who they are. Glasgow has always been the city that builds things, ships, industries, communities, music, reputations. With a city where, next slide please, Billy Connolly learned to be funny. Next slide, please. Charles Rennie Mackintosh learned to draw. and where Alexander Greek Thomson built cathedrals out of sandstone. And next slide, please. And if we're talking of time travel, it's the only city that's produced 3 Doctor Whos. We are the city where if you fall over in the street, 3 people will help you up, and 1 will offer you a cup of tea or at least a can of iron brew. That Glasgow hasn't disappeared. It's just been under a heavy cloud. But clouds move, and what's underneath is still beautiful. When Glasgow kicked off its 850th birthday, King Charles said, "I hope that Glaswegians new and old can reflect on centuries of resilience, enterprise, and shared achievements, all of which will guide you to an even more prosperous future." And you know what? I think His Majesty is right, because every time I've written a column moaning about Glasgow, and believe me, there have been a few, my inbox has been flooded, not just with complaints, but with ideas and people volunteering their energies. People saying, "I'll help, I've got a plan, I'm starting something, I'm staying." So here's my actual prediction, not for the next 850 years, but maybe the next 8. We'll clean up the city, we'll get real leadership, we'll support our artists and our weirdos and our startups, we'll stop apologising for being Glasgow, we'll start being Glasgow again. And when we do, when we really back ourselves again, this city could be the envy of Europe. Not despite who we are, but because of who we are. We just need to believe we're worth it, because we absolutely are. Thank you.
That was marvellous. I think for questions we'll need to use the mic because there's a big crowd. And again, because there's a big crowd, if maybe you could keep your comments or questions reasonably brief so that Philip has a chance to respond. But comments or questions for Philip, who wants to start? I could take chair's privilege and say, if there was one thing in the next 10 years that you thought would make a difference, what would you say we should all get behind of all the opportunities you outlined at the end there?
To leadership, I think that having someone there who can articulate all these things in the way Michael Kelly did, I think is the most important starting point. I think that would be my first wish.
And we should get behind whoever that is.
Yeah.
Right, comments or questions? Right, Philip, the other Philip, I see. And then I see a lady there. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. A really interesting talk. As somebody who actually lives in the city of Glasgow, I have first-hand experience of the lack of leadership. In fact, the insularity. As a resident, it is almost impossible to contact the council unless you can tick the right box in a form. And so often what you want to talk about hasn't been thought out and put into a form so as you can just tick the box. The leadership of the council is atrocious. There is a strategic plan across the Glasgow area that brings in the surrounding authorities and has got money from the Scottish Government and from Westminster. And it's doing quite a lot. But I bet most people here don't know about it because they don't advertise it, they don't promote it in the way Manchester promoted it. And I mean, for instance, the most local one here is the road to Barrhead, which has been closed forever and ever, but they are rebuilding it with money that they've brought in. And they're just, you know, I just agree with you so much. But I'm wondering if this, you know, bringing together East Renfrewshire don't want to be part of Glasgow and the East Dunbartonshire don't want to be part of Glasgow. But if you look at what the Mayor of Greater Manchester is covering a group of local authorities, and I wonder if that's what we need, a conurbation mayor who brings together the local authorities and offers the real leadership and allows individual local authorities to be seen to work together and not be dominated by Glasgow.
Yeah, I think there's some very good points that you're making there, Philip. I think that having a sort of greater Glasgow authority, would be of great help to us. The other point, coming back to the inability to communicate in a meaningful way with the council, I don't know if you're aware, but there is an annual meeting that we're all invited to at the Radisson Blue. I've gone 2 or 3 times, but what the council does, it's completely self-congratulatory, and there's a refusal to confront the problems. And that's the trouble. The dialogue that we have is not listened to if it is complaint. It is, the responses are self-congratulatory. But I agree with you. I think a greater Glasgow authority would be of assistance to us.
Hi, and thank you for that talk. I found myself agreeing with everything that you said, but I was just wondering what you thought about the amount of rough sleepers and drug takers that are all over the city. Every time I go in, and I go in quite regularly, then there's these poor souls sleeping on mats on nearly all the streets, and there are people wandering about clearly out of it. Nobody's helping them. And many, many years ago, I actually worked for Glasgow City Council in their homelessness unit, and it's heartbreaking to see that 40 years later, I think, things not only haven't changed, but they've got worse. So I didn't really hear you say anything about that. And I know you talked about cleaning up the city, but it's not just the rubbish. It is also the fact that there are these poor souls who nobody is looking after or helping that I can see. And I think that puts off a lot of visitors, and particularly in the evening when things get worse. So I'd just be interested to hear what you had to say about that.
I mean, sadly, rough sleeping is not a Glasgow phenomenon. It's not even a UK phenomenon. Everywhere you go in the world, you see it. And, the bigger issue about how you deal with it is above my pay grade. But I think that certainly there should be steps taken to ensure that it isn't going on where people are stepping off the train at Glasgow Central Station. I don't know how you deal with it, but I think people feel very unsafe stepping out there and seeing drug users, people demanding money and behaving but it's an enormous social problem, and how you deal with that, I'm not sure. But I think at a local level, there should be steps taken to try and ensure that it's not at places where people feel vulnerable.
Here.
Philip, really interesting talk. I was really glad I came along to hear it. I worked in retail in the 1990s, and I slightly disagree with your analysis. The impact of out-of-town shopping centres, which we all use, is something that has caused the decline of the city centre. When Bray Head was built, they gave 6,500 free car parking places. Silverburn came along later, and of course, if you're going to try and shop, you're going to go to one of these 2 places, for example, instead of trying to get yourself into Glasgow with all the problems that have already been discussed elsewhere. So part of the reason for the decline is our own consumer usage.
I'd be disappointed. I don't disagree with you about that, but I think we have to recognise that is the case and repurpose the city, to take account of that. And that may be about having more independent traders, more boutique, more rather than having chains. And that is what I saw in Melbourne, for example. There was an acceptance that there's a type of shopping where people go outside the city, but the recognition that there are specialist stores where people are very happy to have that city experience. But it's not trying to reinvent the past with a Marks and Spencer in every high street, but recognising that there's been a change. We buy things online. We go to out of city retail centres. But it's not to try and reinvent what we did in the past.
Gentleman there, and then lady here. Paul.
Would it not cost relatively little to have a better transport policy by the City Council in Glasgow? I mean, they've now brought out their idea of having a congestion charge, and they're going to have toll charges in the Clyde Tunnel. Is that going to damage business even more and travel to the arts, restaurants, leisure centres? The whole transport policy by the City of Glasgow is destroying the city, it seems.
I agree with you. I don't think the city's worked out what it really wants. I mean, if they're trying to encourage people to go into the West End of Glasgow at night, you know, and you go to restaurants and cafes there, and it's going to cost you £8 an hour to park, you know, that's destructive. And at the same time, having a tube service which goes off, I think is it at 9 o'clock on a Sunday? Is it? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that they've worked out what it is they want to achieve, and have then devised a transport system to support it. I think it's completely they mixed up. So I agree with you.
Sorry, I think you were first.
Thank you for your talk. I was just wondering, you gave 8 points. How can we afford as a city to pay for them? Or where are we going to get the money to do these very, very desirable?
I mentioned before that I know of foreign investors who've looked at Glasgow and they've been discouraged because of the way they were treated by the council. Rather than being welcomed, they felt that they just weren't being listened to. So I think it is engaging, you know, with investors from throughout the world, trying to encourage commerce into the city and demonstrating that we're open for business in the way Manchester has done. I understand that Howard Bernstein used to go to conferences all over the world, you know, property development conferences, encouraging people to come there and invest. I think Glasgow City Council does the reverse. See it happening.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was a really, really interesting talk that you gave, and I had a few things that I reflected on, having lived in some of the cities that you referenced, Melbourne, and I've lived in London, and one of the things that I think about when I think about what you talk about, what does Glasgow see itself as? One of the things that I thought about, which you picked up about when you spoke about Melbourne, is this confidence that it has about itself. You know, that they are happy to be at the top of the pile. They are happy to be at the cutting edge of things. You know, when I lived there, I worked in hospitality, and it was widely seen as one of the best places in the world. You know, it was revered amongst people all over the world, and people that I knew personally who were going around the world and saying, yeah, I trained up in Melbourne. And I think that they were unashamed about that. And so one of the things that I thought about was that you can talk about all these strategies and all the things, but how do you actually inspire people to say, we are Glasgow and we are cutting edge, we are the best and we want to be the best? Because sometimes the way that I think about it and the way that I feel about it is that people have a little bit of a sort of tall poppy syndrome here. You know, you don't like to be seen to be the, you know, it's this sort of, hey, you know, like I'm kind of with you on this sort of base level, and you know, like I don't actually want to sort of get above my station, you know. And I think it's a kind of way in which, how do you actually inspire people to come along and say, hey, there's nothing to be ashamed about there, because we are and have been a fantastic city. How do we go on to breed that mentality?
I think you're onto something there. You know, as I was mentioning in my talk, Manchester celebrates wealth. There's nothing wrong to be there and spend a lot of money in the city. There's nothing wrong with being successful. And I think, unfortunately, that is not just a Glaswegian thing. I think it's a Scottish thing. And I think we have to get out of that. The other point you were making is, you know, about how do we change our frame of reference? And I'm old enough to have seen, you know, what happened with the... Well, I spoke to Michael Kelly a number of years ago about the Glasgow's Miles Better campaign, and he told me that when it was invented, and the intention was to promote Glasgow externally, you know, but the unintended consequence, and the one which was more powerful, was that it inspired people internally. It gave them some sort of purpose. And it was a silly, smiley man, but it was something that everybody kind of got behind. So I think it's about inspiring ourselves, believing in ourselves, not feeling sorry for ourselves, but being authentic, not trying to be London or Manchester or Melbourne, but, you know, that essence of Glasgow. But I think it needs that inspiration.
Time for about one more.
I hope I'm not the last one as Philip's little sister. I'm glad I came and listened. Thank you very much for your talk. I agreed with everything you said. In particular, I loved what you said about the importance of Glasgow considering the health impact of its decisions, its policies, its strategies moving forward. The challenge that we have is the wider context. I think it's a lesson and a takeaway lesson for the Scottish Government and the government across the UK that there has to be considerations the whole way forward about what is the impact on the health of our nation for the decisions we make. So thank you for making that point.
No, I mean, you know, health is at the centre of everything. And, you know, as I was saying, when you look at the statistics for Glasgow, they're absolutely frightening in 2025 that we should tolerate that. So on that happy note...
Well, Philip, I think we've made you work very hard, and I think there'll be an opportunity over a cup of tea and coffee to continue the exciting and stimulating thoughts that you have shared with us. I, like you, remember I'm at the University of Glasgow, to, you know, we're from Glasgow, and, you know, it was the Garden Festival, it was a city of culture, and people wanted to learn from us, and I think we can revitalise that confidence about being authentically Glasgow for the next 850 years. But your contribution, I think, has got all of our minds working, and I think it's been a fascinating talk. Thank you so much for coming along, and I'd like you to join me in thanking Philip in the traditional way. A little bit of time to serve everyone, but there's teas and coffees and chocolate biscuits in traditional Scottish fashion, and I think the conversations and the discussions can continue over tea and coffee. Thank you all again for coming along.